The battlefield stretched across the crimson plains of Volcara, littered with the broken bodies of warriors from a dozen worlds. Smoke rose from burning war machines, and the air reeked of scorched metal and blood. Queen Thalia stood among the carnage, her golden armor dented and streaked with dark ichor. She clutched her side where a plasma blade had found its mark, the wound seeping through her fingers, despite her best efforts to staunch the flow. Around her, the remnants of her elite guard formed a protective circle, their weapons pointed outward at the advancing enemy forces. The Kravik's horde had proven more cunning than anticipated, and now her army was scattered across the valley, cut off from reinforcements. Thalia's vision blurred as pain lanced through her torso, but she refused to show weakness. She was the warrior queen of the Voltar Empire, descended from conquerors who had subjugated 50 worlds. She would not fall here. "My queen, we must retreat," her commander urged, his voice tight with concern. Thalia shook her head, the movement sending fresh waves of agony through her body. "We hold this position. Reinforcements will arrive." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were hollow. The communications array had been destroyed in the first wave of the attack. No one was coming. The Kraviks pressed forward, their chittering war cries echoing across the plains. Thalia raised her energy blade with a trembling hand, ready to meet death with honor. Then her legs buckled, and she collapsed to her knees. The world tilted sideways, and she felt strong hands catch her before she hit the ground. "Get her to the medical transport," someone shouted. Darkness claimed her. When Thalia woke, she found herself in a dim bunker that smelled of damp earth and antiseptic. The walls were rough stone, and a single light panel flickered overhead. She tried to sit up, but pain exploded through her midsection, forcing her back down with a gasp. "Don't move. You'll tear the sutures." The voice was human. Thalia turned her head to see a man sitting on a simple stool beside her makeshift bed. He was young, perhaps 30 cycles, with brown hair and tired eyes. He wore the gray tunic of a slave, marked with the brand of her household on his shoulder. "John," she said, recognizing him despite her confusion. He was one of the humans who had been assigned to her medical staff, a species she had always regarded with disdain. Humans were weak, their bodies fragile, their lifespans pathetically short. They had been conquered within weeks when the Voltar fleets arrived at their system, and most had been dispersed throughout the Empire as laborers and servants. "Where are my guards?" Thalia demanded. John dipped a cloth in a basin of water and wrung it out. "Dead. All of them. I carried you here when the position was overrun." "You carried me?" Thalia's voice dripped with disbelief. "A human? Your armor weighs more than I do, but yes." He pressed the damp cloth to her forehead, and she was too weak to push him away. "The Kraviks are patrolling above us. This bunker was abandoned years ago, but it's shielded enough that their scanners can't detect us." Thalia stared at the ceiling, processing this information. She had been saved by a slave, a creature she had barely acknowledged as sentient. The irony was almost amusing, if it weren't so humiliating. "How long have I been unconscious?" 2 days. Your wound was deep, but I managed to seal the worst of it. You have an infection starting, though. Without proper medical supplies, I don't know how long you'll last." "Then leave me," Thalia said coldly. "Return to the surface and surrender to the Kraviks. Tell them where I am. Perhaps they'll show you mercy for betraying me." John looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm not going to do that." "Why not?" "You owe me nothing. My people enslaved yours, destroyed your cities, scattered your families across the stars. You should want me dead." "Maybe I should," John agreed. He stood and moved to a small supply cache in the corner, pulling out a medkit that looked like it had seen better days. "But I took an oath once, a long time ago." First, do no harm. That oath didn't come with exceptions for people I don't like. An oath? Thalia scoffed. You're a slave. What oath could you have possibly taken? I was a doctor before your ships came. I worked at a hospital on Earth, saving lives. He returned to her side and began examining her wound, his hands gentle but efficient. I couldn't save most of the people I cared about when the invasion happened, but I can save you. Thalia watched him work, feeling something uncomfortable stir in her chest. She had never given much thought to what humans had been before the conquest. They were simply there, performing tasks, existing at the edges of her awareness. The idea that this slave had once been a healer, someone respected by his own people, was strange to contemplate. You should hate me, she said quietly. I probably should, John admitted. He applied a fresh bandage to her wound, his movements practiced and sure. But hate takes energy, and I'm trying to keep both of us alive right now. That's taking all the energy I have. Over the following days, Thalia's condition worsened before it improved. The infection John had warned about spread, sending her into fevered delirium. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes seeing John's face hovering above her, sometimes seeing phantoms from her past. In her lucid moments, she was aware of him constantly working, cleaning her wound, forcing water and nutrient paste between her lips, monitoring her vital signs with the limited equipment available. During one particularly bad night, when the fever made her entire body shake, she felt John place additional blankets over her, despite the warmth of the bunker. Why? She whispered. Because you're cold, he said simply. No, why are you doing this? Why save the life of someone who has given you nothing but contempt? John was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. When I was in medical school, my professor told us something I never forgot. She said that every life we save is an act of defiance against entropy, against the universe's tendency toward chaos and death. It doesn't matter who the person is or what they've done. The act of saving them is what makes us human. But I'm not human, Thalia pointed out. No, but I am. John adjusted the blankets around her. And I'm choosing to be the person I was before all this, not the person your empire tried to make me into. The fever broke on the 6th day. Thalia woke feeling weak, but clear-headed for the first time since her injury. John was asleep in the corner, slumped against the wall with dark circles under his eyes. She studied him with new eyes, seeing not a slave, but a man who had sacrificed his own comfort to ensure her survival. When he woke, she spoke before he could check on her condition. Tell me about Earth, about your life before. John blinked in surprise. Why do you want to know? Because I realized I never asked. About you or any of your kind. We conquered your world and never bothered to learn what we were taking. So John told her. He spoke of blue skies and vast oceans, of cities that sparkled with light, of a civilization that had been on the cusp of reaching for the stars on their own terms. He told her about his family, his work, the patients he had saved, and the ones he had lost. He spoke of music and art, of literature and philosophy, of all the things that made humanity more than just another species to be catalogued and subjugated. Thalia listened, and for the first time in her life, felt shame. On the 10th day, they heard sounds from above. John froze, his hand moving instinctively to the small weapon Thalia had given him from her remaining equipment. Vulture ships, Thalia said, recognizing the distinctive hum of her empire's engines. The fleet must have finally arrived. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a complicated tangle of emotions she couldn't quite name. Rescue meant returning to her life, to her throne, to a society where John would once again be nothing more than property. The bunker's entrance unsealed with a hiss, and armed soldiers poured in. They secured the space quickly, and then her second-in-command, General Vex, appeared. My queen. Thank the ancestors you're alive. He spotted John, and his expression hardened. What is this slave doing here? He saved my life, Thalia said, her voice steady and clear. He carried me to safety, treated my wounds, and kept me alive when infection threatened to kill me. Vex looked skeptical. A human did all this? Yes. Thalia struggled to sit up, and this time John helped her, his hands supporting her back. She looked at the general, then at the soldiers, seeing them truly for perhaps the first time. Take us to the ship. And General, this human is to be treated as a guest, not a prisoner. But my queen, that is an order. The journey back to the capital took 3 weeks. During that time, Thalia spent hours in conversation with John, learning more about humanity and questioning beliefs she had held her entire life. She learned that strength came in many forms, that compassion was not weakness, and that the empire she served had perhaps lost something essential in its endless conquest. When they arrived at the palace, Thalia summoned her council. Before them all, she made a decree that sent shockwaves through the empire. John of Earth is hereby granted his freedom and appointed as my personal physician. Furthermore, I am establishing a commission to review the treatment of human slaves throughout our territories. The council erupted in protest, but Thalia silenced them with a raised hand. She was still the warrior queen, and her word was law. Later, in her private chambers, John stood before her, no longer wearing the gray tunic of a slave, but